Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. Also podcasts everywhere, Facebook Live, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. You can go to talklawradio.com to listen to previous episodes. You can search by subject, and you can go to YouTube if you want to watch these episodes in bite-sized 10-minute segments. We have that as well. Today we're talking to Scott McMurrian, who's a commercial real estate broker, about office space, retail space, industrial space, and he mentioned before the break that you should start thinking about whether you want to stay or whether you want to leave 18 months before the lease comes up so that you can start talking about options. Well, let's get into some of the numbers that you brought, Scott. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, all segments of the marketplace are interesting if it's the market you're in. If you're in retail, you kind of want to know what's going on in the retail market, industrial likewise, and the office. But I'll start with office, and we can switch to whatever category we have time to. But there is so much national news that would suggest, I'm going to use the word in the article you referenced, apocalyptic.
Right.
And as you know, we're a tenant representation firmly. It's what we do every day, all day, is taking care of business people, not representing landlords. So my peers around the country have been telling me sad sack stories about how low the activity's been, how much vacancy there is. Their business has been struggling. That has fortunately been picking up and been changing. But compared to Texas, they are in an apocalyptic state.
Okay.
Because it's just the world is not rebounding at all compared to what we're seeing.
It's not like Texas. Texas is a bit different.
It's remarkably different. I thank God every day that I get to, have my family in San Antonio and get to do business here.
So say something more about the way you run your business, because you're an original. You're a little bit different than the way most other commercial real estate brokers work.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. There are a lot of outstanding people practicing commercial real estate, and I enjoy working with many of them. There are many areas you can specialize in commercial real estate, or you can choose to wear a really big hat where you just do a little bit of everything. That's not how God wired me. I do best when I focus on one or two things. And a number of years ago, before I started my company, I realized there's a lot of conflict of interest in real estate. You cannot be on both sides and not see it. And so I made a decision that I would start a tenant representation practice so that my clients would never have to wonder, whose side are you really on? And so we're 100% every day on the side of business people and nonprofits when they're having to make real estate decisions. In a way, I feel like we're their temporary real estate department without being on their payroll.
Right.
And so we just come along at the right time. We get introduced to a lot of our clients. A lot of our clients are calling us back. For over the years, we get to work with the same people. We work with really smart people. Our best clients are very sharp. They're very good at what they do, but they have enough humility to recognize what they don't know, and they're willing to ask. I see a real estate transaction from the chair of the business person because I am one, and all of us are trying to mitigate our risks. Well, you can't mitigate your risks on a large financial decision, usually without a team. And let me give you an example. Playing my role is very important, but I can't fill all roles. I'm not an environmental specialist. I don't do asbestos reports. I don't give them legal advice.
Yeah.
I don't do architectural work. and we could go on and on. They're ultimately, depending on what you're facing, your team could be relatively small, or it might necessarily be rather large, because you're trying to mitigate risks and eventually go down the tunnel to a good decision that you can live with.
Right. Okay, so you only represent tenants, people that are looking to lease the space, and so you were about to talk numbers about how the market here is locally.
Yes, I want to jump into these numbers, but I would have my hand slapped by people who love me, like my wife, if I didn't also say we help people buy property when they don't want to lease anymore.
Oh, okay.
And so if I always talk about what I do 90% of the time, we can forget there's the other side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
We help people do buy lease analysis because I don't know what's in their best interest till we dive in. But that's another conversation. I do want to talk about the office market. There are a lot of vacancies. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You drive down some of the major roads, 1604, and you look over, and it's like parking lot seems like it's pretty empty here.
Mm-hmm.
If you stop and look in windows, there's vacancies in the retail stores. And so from just that perspective, you can think, why in the world are the rates so high when there's so much vacancy? Well, we have more vacancy than we did last year. We certainly have more than the pre-pandemic of COVID, and it is strongly influenced by how many people are able to work from home. That's actually turned out in an interesting way to be a good and a bad thing, that employers can keep good people by giving them the option to work from home. Now, here's an overall sweeping statement based on my practice and what I'm seeing in my conversations with my peers, is a lot of people are going back to work for their own reasons. Owners are discovering productivity is actually higher. There's more synergy. There's all kinds of reasons for people to come back, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. So the market has all this millions of square feet of office space, and there's more vacancy. So what does that tell you? Supply and demand is tilted in favor of the tenant.
Right.
But it's very interesting. We've got like 191 million square feet of office space. We have 13% vacancy. That sounds pretty high. It is, but it's splendid compared to other major cities around the country. Our average rental rate is $28 a square foot. That's just an average. There's certainly a lot less, and there are significantly higher rents than that. But for perspective, Austin has 132 million square feet. Their vacancy is 16%.
Okay.
And their rate is $44 a foot.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of leads you back to scratching your head thinking, okay, high vacancy rate, I should be seeing awesome deals.
That's what I would think.
You're not entirely wrong. It gets back a little bit to starting early. Is if you're patient and you have an early plan and you have some flexibility about where you can go, landlords are getting nervous. And that creates opportunities not to beat them up, but to be sure that you're getting closer and closer to the lowest end of the range of value that makes any sense for the market we're in. We can't make the market up. We just want to function really well in it.
Yeah.
And so by being thorough and constantly investigating new things that are coming on the market, finding 3, 4, 5 options that work, that puts pressure on the landlord to win the deal. They have to make concessions, and they know it.
So besides the rate, what are some other factors that could make it a better deal?
That's a very, very good question. Over the last few years, one of the things that has killed some transactions has been the cost of construction. The landlord does not have a money tree. They've got a certain amount of money that they have set aside for construction. And if a tenant comes along, wants to be in the space, but the cost to prepare that space exceeds the number that the landlord can tolerate, well, there are two choices. The tenant can make up the difference and bring a check to the table, and that actually does happen in some cases. Or we can get a longer lease so the landlord can amortize all those additional expenses. And that's actually happening quite a lot. It has been over the last 3 years. Coming out of COVID, everybody probably remembers clearly, we were frozen for a while. There was very little activity, but I could sense demand was just kind of tied up, but it was still there. And before 2020 was over with, I was already starting to get busy again. 2021, outstanding. 2022 was solid. 2023, the first couple of months were shaky and slow. And ironically, I found out it's sort of tied to the confidence index of CEOs.
Oh.
But as that started tweaking and moving in the right direction, it's like somebody slammed the door wide open in March, and I have been busy ever since.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. I'm grateful. I know where my blessings come from. I can't make anything happen.
Yeah.
I just try to be faithful with the work God gives me to do.
Amen. Okay, so what about the big boys? Let's talk about what USAA is doing. I read this article in the most recent Business Journal about USAA asking their employees to come back to work, and you mentioned some of those ideal characteristics for business, the synergy of having people in the office.
Yes, USAA surprised me when they stayed, in a sense, closed. The doors were closed, not for business, but not for employees.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody stayed home, probably except essential personnel. And they stayed that way long after the pandemic was over with, which is I just was puzzled by it. But slowly, over the last year, they've returned to normalcy. As you know, you mentioned a few minutes ago, they went and laid off a bunch of people, and then they've stabilized, and then they start hiring again. But not only are they saying it, but people that I know with USAA are saying, yeah, we're working 4 days a week.
Okay.
We get to stay at home one day. We're working from there.
Mm-hmm.
But more and more, their employees are showing up. In smaller businesses, where sometimes it's harder to compete for good employees, the employer is under more pressure to be accommodating.
Right.
To not lose somebody that's very valuable to the company.
Mm-hmm.
But most people that are part of a company, they look at the reality of it and they realize, what do I need to do to be more productive? What do I need to help our company win? And they're willing to adjust and come in maybe 3 days a week, whereas before, a year before, they would have said, nope, I'm at home the whole time.
Right. So the employment market has some bearing on the commercial real estate market.
It does. It does. There are huge economic factors, and we can talk about some of the things that are going to affect commercial real estate in general in our next segment.
Okay, great. Thank you for that transition. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what Scott said. We'll also be talking about the saints and sinners. So stay tuned.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law Radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the 10 Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host us know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.